It's here. Yay! Now for the unboxing. And there we are. And what the hell are these things? These are sacks for a Waterman Ink-Vue standard size pen. And from here what I'll do is I'll explain how the pen works and why I had to do a repair, how I did the repair, and then we'll do a short review so this thing isn't way too long. Yay, I got these things, I can finally finish my project. Okay, before I start the review on this pen, I want to tell you how it works because that'll get into your understanding better of how I ended up fixing it. It's a cool pen. I do not have any other pens like it. This is a Waterman Ink-Vue. It's a standard size, and it's a cool pen. It's also a flex pen, and it's a good size. But I'll get into all that detail later. Let me tell you how they made this thing. Now, I'm taking advantage of Richard Binder's book, How to Restore Pens. I have it in the Kindle version that I got on Amazon. He also sells it hardback at different places. The other thing is online at Richard Binder, I think it's just called richardbinder.com, Richard Binder Pens. I'll put it on the screen here. In any case, he has tons and tons of resources that I've used again and again. So large thank you to Richard Binder for having all that stuff out there. And that's what got me figuring out how to do this thing. But later on in the process of working on this thing, there were some questions I had about this seal right here. And someone suggested just write him an email. Well, I wrote him an email and I got an answer back within a couple hours. Maybe it was even less than that. So I haven't met the guy yet, but the next pen show he's at, I'll have to go up and say thank you. The other thing that helped me quite a bit in this is there's one that I could find, one video on YouTube that goes through the sack repair replacement of this particular pen, and this is called a Type 1. Compared to just changing a sack on a regular lever pen, it's more difficult, but once I figured it out and had the right tools, it wasn't that bad. But let me tell you how cool the pen is. What's cool about this, and the way this thing works, is you squeeze this tube up here, which forces air down through here and then out into the ink. That creates a vacuum here, and then that ink is pulled up through this area right here, and it shows this. It's kind of like an ink passage here. It actually comes down, in my opinion, closer to down here. But that pulls the ink up into here. Then you squeeze it again with this lever, and that pushes more air out, creates a vacuum. More comes up. The cool thing about this, well, there's actually several cool things. First of all, you don't have to stick your nib all the way up to the section into the ink. You just have to get to where this little hole is on the feed, and you'll just be able to suck stuff up. So that's going to make it a lot easier to get down closer to the end of the barrel. And after that, you'll still have to use like an tilt-well ink saver. And prior to that, what would make it really easy would be a tilt-well tilted ink bottle holder. The way this thing is put together is this section right here is screwed in, and that's really good to know because a lot of them are friction fit, push-pull. But I always rotate counterclockwise, which may not always be the best idea, but I didn't know that this was screwed at the time. It needed heat, so that tells me that they probably had shellac in here. And that's probably important to have because when this thing fills up, it's basically like an eyedropper pen. Since I've worked with this and put it back together, I put some silicone grease. Let me tell you a bit about silicone grease. In my previous life, I worked in the aerospace industry on rocket engines. I managed a team of technicians testing rocket engines, and then later on I managed teams of engineers for putting facilities together for testing rocket engines, and then I got into actually the marketing of full-blown rocket engines, space engines, military engines, etc. This stuff is golden. We call it DC11. It's Dow Corning Moly Coat. I think it's just about pure silicone. Doesn't react to anything. It's not water soluble. It's really viscous. It's kind of a sticky, but you put it on threads and it prevents galling. You put it on seals and it's a nice kind of sticky. It'll flow a little bit, but it's a much better than, in my opinion, than some of the stuff like this is Pen Tooling Super Slick Silicone Oil, which I think is really sold for piston pens, but this stuff is not, it's slightly viscous, but not as viscous as this stuff. So anyhow, I used this stuff on there and it worked great. I think I'll clean that up for the final fix and put shellac in it like it was before. I was going to tell you the other resource is Grandmia pens. It's this British fellow in England who repairs a lot of his own pens, and he puts out great videos. Lots of detail. He does everything in front of you on the camera, and he went ahead and replaced an ink sac on this. There are a few little details that were missing that I picked up by actually doing it, but between that and Richard Binder's stuff, this is almost like a cookbook. Okay, so the other neat thing about this is this lever. I believe I read that at one point it was a solid lever, and you would lift the thing up and it would push down on a J-bar and squeeze this thing to expel the air and create the vacuum. I'm not sure why they turned it into this much more complicated thing where you lift this thing up and then you the way they put this together is this is a single piece of plastic. It looks like celluloid to me. The way it comes is there's a rubber seal here, and I had a little bit of difficulty trying to figure out which to use, and I'll talk about that as I go through the repair. And then there's like this, you can kind of see it right here, a cone, flat end on this end and like a nipple on this end with a hole through the center. That fits up against the seal, and the seal fits up against this flat surface here. So that creates a seal, because then over here you've got this sack that fits through this threaded ring and then comes out a little bit on the other side, so it sits on this beveled portion of this part right here. Again, this might be clearer when I show you the actual part. And then you screw this down and you create a seal both against this and against the so no glue required, which is kind of cool. The problem I had is when I got it, this is a standard size pen, and there's a smaller one called Lady, and there's two different size sacks that go in there. And from what I could tell is it looked like, again, you'll see this when I pull this apart, but you'll see, well, I will pull it apart right now. By the way, the guy in Grandmia pens, I wish I could remember his name. I'll put it on the screen. He actually put shellac in here. This did not come that way. It's a nice tight seal, so I'm not sure why you'd want to put shellac in there. Okay, so this is a Lady sack. Right now this is inked up, so I don't want to squeeze that. But inside here, it's like another cut up portion of a sack. So either the previous restorer thought that maybe he didn't have a larger sack, or maybe he tried a larger sack in here. There's something about the geometry of this that made it difficult. I don't know. If you just put this on like this, the lever won't hardly squeeze this at all. And that was the problem I had, is that when I got it, even with this on, I would pump and pump and pump, and I would get just like a little a few drops in here, nothing else. So I pulled it apart, and I noticed this first, and then the next thing I noticed is in the this neck area right here, there was a pretty big hole in there, like 1/8 of an inch wide, something like that. I've since temporarily fixed that with a little bit of, no, gotta be careful, just moving this a little bit pushes ink out. There's just a little bit of super glue just on this. You don't want to get it on this area here. And then just to make extra sure, if after dried and cured time and everything, I put just a little bit of shellac over. So now this is leak tight. It probably won't last that long because, you know, every time you pump this, you're moving this bag around. And I don't particularly want it to last long because I want to put that new sack in there. So the other thing I found out is with using Richard Binder's online resource, but it's also in the book, he tells you how to make this little spanner wrench. That took me a while. I'm not really set up to be a metal shop, and it's not the prettiest spanner wrench, but it did the job. And all it's got to do is fit in these two holes here, and then you can unscrew this. So I did all that. I pulled this part out, and I got down to the seal ring down here, and I thought there wasn't one at first. And I took, for lack of a better term, my little poker, and I would tap it, and if it was a seal, it'd be like a deadened sound, but it sounded like that, like it was hitting plastic or like that. So I had to dig this out in little bits and pieces. It was really stuck in there. I think the only reason why, well, I don't know whether it's sealed or not, because what was happening with that hole is it was an air leak, and as soon as I would pull a vacuum, the vacuum would leak out right away. So it was probably happening at the hole and may have been happening at the seal. So then I got into making seals, which I'll talk more about later, and that was the story of that. Okay, so let's take this apart. I emptied the ink mostly out, didn't wash it out, but take the cap off. This was shellacked in before, but now I just have some silicone grease in there. So I used heat on this before to take it apart. So this has this breather tube on it, and I know with other breather tubes I can pull this thing out and friction fit it back in, but I'm not going to test it because I don't know whether that works this way or not. And what I have is, I think this little tool that I got at Pen Tooling. You can use it with a block, a nib block for punching these guys out. And that's what I did, because one of the problems with this particular thing is that the feed, I'm going to exaggerate, was bent down at the end. And so I had a gap here. Even if I heat set it, it wouldn't do it. And if I looked at the contour here and there, it had too much of a like a hump in it. So I pushed this thing out, and I'd love to do it again, but it took some effort to get it back in again. So I'm not going to. But essentially, it looks like this feed right here. There are two holes on this end. So you got the hole that this fits in, and the hole right here, which is mainly the ink feed, and I think this is mainly for pushing the air for vacuum, and then when you're filling it, the ink will squirt out of here primarily. It may also come down here, I don't know. But I'm not going to take that apart because it's a really pretty tight fit. I want to make sure that I had a good fit in there. I still may want to widen this. A little bit because it's kind of stingy and the ink comes out, and I'll show you that in the writing example. Okay, so next I came to this, and this came off pretty easily. And by the way, now that the ink's out, I can kind of show you that the way this thing works is this lever pulls out and is kind of free, and then you can pump it by pressing this down. So I unscrew this, And that's when I noticed this thing in here. And it looks to me like it's just a big sack used from a lever filler. They cut this end off and this end off, and then that, but every time I pump it, it comes up. There we go. So I knew that was wrong. As I said before, what I went ahead to do is I cleaned the little crack that was on here. Excuse me. I super glued and shellacked the little crack that was on here, put this back together, and it was able to fill. The other thing I noticed is you can also kind of just squeeze this and basically duplicate that effort rather than putting all that back together again. So then if you look in, either watch the Grandmia video or the Richard Binder source, you can see how you pull this apart. And what you need is some spanner pliers. You know, I have a spanner plier, but it must not be the right, didn't have the right clearances and everything, or the right point size to get in there and do what I needed to do. And I am not a metal worker, but this was a piece of steel that I had laying around, and you can see how it's not very exact or even. The dimensions are online in Binder site, and basically I used a hacksaw and a Dremel and a drill to do this thing. Used the hacksaw to cut out this thin piece, used a drill to put a hole through here, and then it was a Dremel work after that. And then when you're all done, you need to sand it down real good so it's not really cut, which is probably the reason why there was a hole here in the first place, because you're putting a little bit of amount of pressure right in here and trying to turn this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and take this apart to put the new sack on. So I'll make sure I'm in both holes, and it's not that tight. Interestingly enough, if you tighten this too much, you'll close the little hole. You know, at this point, I can almost do it by hand. And it's actually stuck down there a little bit. There you go. So there you can see the end of this thing and the screwed, you can see the end of the thing, and you can see this this thing that locks it down. It gets locked on onto this thing. It has a bevel on it and a hole through the center. This is the face right here that seals up against this seal right here. Right now this has got my seal in. You can see the hole through it. Now when I did this, I couldn't get anything to come out. And I had to be careful pulling it out because you can scratch that surface in there, and you kind of depend on a nice flat smooth surface to provide a seal against this thing. Now this is a washer that I made. The other washer is just in bits and pieces. No clue that it was ever a washer. And I made that little washer. And how did I make that washer? And by the way, I think in the Grandmia's pen video, he doesn't talk about what material to use. I think he's keeping that as a trade secret. I think it's a bicycle tire tube, because I had some old ones laying around, and it's about the size, and I think it's probably fairly good material. And so I did that at first. So I went out and I bought a bunch of different rubbers. I bought some sheets of this neoprene, which is really nice and soft and kind of gummy. I thought that would work out great. But Richard Binder replied to my email and questioned this thing. By the way, this is a 1/32 thickness. I bought a larger one, but then, of course, with the larger one, this thing doesn't go all the way down flush on this thing, on the barrel. But with this 1/32 size stuff, it does work. I think this would work. Mr. Bender said that it has an issue with acidic inks because some of the inks, and I have some of them, go down to a pH of about 2, and a few go even lower than that. But, you know, I don't know about that. I mean, he has all the experience in the world. I have no experience, but again, in my career, I've worked with a lot of acids. It's got a pH of 2, which is pretty acidic. Excuse me, the inks in the lower level that I use can be in the pH of 2. But that's the same pH of lemon juice. So, I don't know. I looked up the qualities of this. He suggested using Buna N, which I think is the same thing as nitrile, and I just got that today. So I'll be making a seal out of this stuff. This is 1/32. And he said that's much better for acids. But in the charts that I looked at, if you're just comparing acids, sometimes both of these were not good at all. Sometimes this was a little bit better. Maybe in a few more instances, the Buna N or nitrile was better. But I have a hard time. This is the same stuff that I think wetsuits are made of. Neoprene. Anyhow, enough on that. I'm going to take his advice. He's the old wise one, and I'm going to use the nitrile. I did not have any letter punch kits. I actually got a few because I wasn't sure how big this hole should be for the outer diameter of this thing. It turns out it's just about 7 millimeters. I've done some stuff with a different punch that gave me about a 6.7 millimeter OD, and it worked fine too. I think as long as this part seals on that and this seals on the little hole in there, then it works. But it's probably better if it goes across all of this, and when I smush down on it, not only am I smushing it between this and that, but I'm also pressing it up against the side so everything's trying to seal. It just seems to make sense to me. So I went with 7 millimeters. This is a 7 millimeter punch. And I have enough seal material to last me a few lifetimes. So if anybody sees this and would be willing to pay for postage, I can send you a little square of this. So the set I got actually had a little cutting board. I had this nice little hammer in my kit. Oh, now that's interesting. This stuff is tougher than the... Try a different hole. This is tougher than the neoprene. I got that good now. Set that off to the side. Pop this out. So that's a pretty nicely cut little washer. I overhit that one. Oh well. Now for the smaller hole. And this is kind of tricky because you want to get it as in the center as you can. I've done some of these where it's a little hole here and you've got to line it up so it matches in the center. So basically I eyeball it to try and get equal sides all around it. Okay, side to side it looks good that way. Oh, maybe I got lucky with this one. And voila. there is the other washer. This is the new sack. You can see the difference here. We'll go ahead and take this guy out. So I don't know what he was thinking when he put that in there. You know, one of the things I want to try now is let's try sticking this thing in here. No, it fits in there great. I don't know what was going on. Anyhow, okay, so the next thing we do is I want to trim this down a little bit further. Okay, and we want to put this in with the little guide things above there. Not the guide things, the spanner wrench. I should know the guy's name at Grandmia pens. Oh, of course I'm putting it in backwards. I'm tempted to always kind of go in there and grab it with this, but those points make me nervous. Okay, we have that there, and what will happen is that this will go up against this when it's inside there, but we don't want to have so much that it goes around the edges there. So no one really explains really well how to do this, but I am going to cut a little bit at a time. Okay, maybe what I do is use a scalpel and do this carefully so I do not cut myself. That doesn't look too bad. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is, and I'm probably the only person in the world who uses this DC-111. I'm just going to kind of put this on my fingers and then coat the C a little bit, get the sides a little bit. I don't want to put too much in there because when I squeeze down I could potentially close up that hole. But just a little bit will take care of any. There, see, that looks pretty good. And I am going to do the same thing here. Yeah, so that looks clean again. So I'm going to take this and place it down there. And then this put down here. Put this in here, making sure. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll back thread it till it clicks, and that puts me right in there. All right, now for my special tool, which I will fit. Oh yeah, it's just a little fatter, huh, than that other one. All right. I'm in. Starting to get tight. What I did before is I could squeeze this, and sometimes if it stayed squeezed, that meant that I had tightened down on the seal too much. Whoop. See, I squeezed down this and nothing happened, so I went a little bit too far. There, that's good. All right, so then the next thing I'm going to do is, you won't be able to see this, but this is some soapy water. I'm dribbling over everything right now. And I will put it around here while I blow on it, see if I get any fuzz. No fuzz. So I got it in there, and opens and close good. Okay, so now I'm going to have to do is put it in this thing and make sure it's kind of slick enough so that the little bar in there doesn't try and twist this around. Should probably just take the cap off and stick it in there. That probably would waste less talc. That's what I've seen other people do. Stef, that's his name. The Grandmia pen, Stef. I wonder what that's short for. So it's pretty well talked. And the other thing I kind of notice is that if you do this with the clip side down to begin with, then that thing stays down sort of flat, so it doesn't offend this. Is that a word for use here? I don't know. Anyhow, I'm carefully closing this so that I'm not feeling any tension due to the twisting. Coming back a little bit. All right, so I'm not going to put Stef at Grandmia pens, put some lacquer in there, and I actually have a couple bottles of lacquer. Another good source for lacquer, pen tooling, or Anderson pens. So that's nice and tight, and let's see how this works. Yeah, it has a nice spring to it. I can't really see anything from this end. Okay, now on this side, on here, I'm going to go ahead and put this in. You know, I have this silicone here. That might be okay. That probably would be okay, but I kind of like the idea of the shellac in there. Okay. You know, there's no solvents to use on this stuff. But all you can do is rub it off. So there'll be a little bit on there. Not sure how that will work. With the shellac. And there's also some silicone in here. So I need to make sure clean that out. Cleaning the silicone out. Okay. So the next time I take this apart, I will need to put the heat gun on it. But I don't want to have any leaks. And this will make sure that I don't have any. So with the silicone. Always got to be careful when you thread it. Never want to get any bad Alright, so that's nice and tight. Just cleaning some of the excess shellac off. And that should be it. Well, I guess we should drop some water. Alright, this is just basically water that's been flushed a little bit. So when we do this, you should be able to see bubbles come out. That's the right position. And I don't have to stick it down that far, like I said before. But okay, so you pull it back, nothing happens, and then you pump. And every time you see bubbles come out, it's drawing ink up into it. I can also feel the bulb, I think, filling up a little bit. So that is full of water. So this kind of pen holds a lot of ink. I mean, this whole, let's go back a little bit. This whole section from here to there is solid ink except for that little breather tube. Alright, so next I'll do a review of the pen and you get to see how it writes after I put some real ink in. Hi, welcome to Old Guys Gentlemen Flex Fountain Pens. This is episode number 55 and this will be the review of the Waterman Ink-Vue Standard Pen. Of course, now you've already seen how it works and how you fix it, so now I'll talk a little bit about what I like and don't like about the pen. There's not much I don't like. This is it right here. It's called a Type 1 Green Ray. It's got a double action lever right here, which I've shown before. It's got a 14K keyhole nib. There we go. It's got a 14K keyhole nib. It is flexible. Let's see how fine it is. All right, I would say you're probably having a hard time even seeing that. That is at least double extra fine. Maybe even triple extra fine. Let's see how it flexes. Okay, so it starts to lose a little bit up here, but that's probably on the order of triple broad, I would guess. What does it look like when we do the figure eights? Not bad. Yeah, I would call this a medium flex plus. It's not full flex. It takes a little bit of effort to get it to flex. And yeah, I have other full flex and wet noodle pens that will go, maybe another 30, 40, 50% wider than that. But that's more than enough for Spencerian kind of writing. Just with writing this, it felt very very springy, and it is. So that's nice when you get a snapback to a fine line from a double, triple bold kind of. Let's do some writing. Actually, before I start writing, I'll tell you some of the things I like and don't like about this pen. But this point, I love the design on it. I love this very cool gold cap. I assume it's like a gold-filled cap. I've already talked about the cool filling system and the fact that you only have to be about this deep to fill with. Clip is nice, all kind of a deco sort of design. It has a nice close on it. The clip and the lever are almost aligned with it. That's always kind of cool when you see that. This particular one, the imprints on here are like really good. For some reason, there's also this engraving on here, mysterious. I was told that it came from Switzerland. Anyhow, one of the things I don't like about it is, and it's the only thing I don't like about it, it will post. But it gets hung up right here, and it will stay there. It's a little precarious, I think. Yeah, it stays there okay. I didn't want to push it too much further than that. Maybe at one point there was enough material here that this would have fit on here better. Yeah, I don't want to push it over that clip. Let's see if I come in here so you can see it better. See how that comes right up against the clip. Although that's pretty firm the way it is right there. Oh, I see, it's just beginning to come over that edge. That's what makes it firm. Other than that, I kind of like it. So now let's get into some writing. And I do like to post. By the way, cap, this pen's about 5 1/8 inches. I'm not paying attention here. Let's try that again. There. So yeah, I'm gonna refine what I was saying before. I was thinking this is medium flex plus. This is definitely like a medium flex, because when I was writing here, it took a little bit more effort to get the whiter stuff. So that is it for this review. Sorry it's kind of long, but if you ever get an Ink-Vue, I think the description of how I repaired stuff would be pretty good. Feel free to ask me questions. Please feel free to leave comments if I did something that is really ill-advised, as my lawyer friends would say. Until next time, thank you for watching.